This is some real talk to help you decide what kind of health path you want to go down. What is true healing and why is it not for everyone? I'm Sienna Songbird, warrioress on the path of self-healing. I consider myself, and others do too, a wild alchemist who's not afraid to go all the way. So make sure you read the fine print before jumping on board. By the way, I put on this little water moving background, nature background to add a little boost of healing for this session for you guys. Hopefully you enjoy it. So what is true healing and why is it not for everyone? Well, first let's go into a little bit about what I mean by true healing. So some might consider that when we eliminate a symptom, that is considered healing. So there are ways to eliminate symptoms, such as taking drugs or medicines or applying certain, restrictions to your behavior that will alleviate certain levels of symptoms. This wouldn't be considered like true healing because you're kind of just laying something over the symptoms that are there. What I consider true healing is really digging for the root of the problem and uprooting it, getting it fully out and uprooted. So this is not, that's not the only option in terms of for our lives. And um there's, it's valid to take a different approach. In fact, I did study Chinese medicine and I studied with this really incredible uh, lineage holder who was the 88th priest of this jade lineage. And he was explaining to us that in some cases, even the most advanced healers and Chinese medicine practitioners would not advocate for true healing for a condition. And he was talking about, in particular, especially someone older that had not a lot of sort of vital life energy left, who had an advanced state of cancer. And although it may be possible to truly uproot and heal that condition, the cost would be too high. And so in that case, the doctor recommended instead, and the approach that they took for this patient was to consolidate and put into latency this disease aspect, this pathological aspect. And you can see that that's sort of like the default mode for our society is, and actually for our bodies. I think when the body knows that it's overwhelmed in any given moment, it is likely to put the pathology into latency. And you can see this in the liver. And this is why we have so much material to flush out when we're doing liver flushes, because the body was overwhelmed and it decided to put something into latency. And so it sequestered it in, deep in a crevice of the liver. And this is a energy preserving technique. So it's a way to conserve energy and we do seem to run ourselves pretty hard in this day and age. And so it's understandable why this might be a good approach. So this is a reason why it's really important to consider whether or not it makes sense for you to pull something out of latency and try to turn it over and unearth it, or whether it would actually be smarter to just encourage it to go deeper into latency and consolidate that pathology. So when we look at the option of excavating the dis-ease, the pathology, instead of putting it into latency, we are opening up a can of worms, basically. And Therefore, we don't know exactly how it's going to progress that healing journey. And in general, it is not usually completely a linear process. So let's just take an example, look at it. A good way to conceptualize what rooting out the underlying cause is and this like pathology that's been packed away is when we look at liver flushing. So the liver has sequestered all of this material, these stones, this information, these little packages of cholesterol that have within them, a toxicity or a pathogen or something that it, wanted to protect us from. It's like imagine you have an attic or a basement that you've been storing things in and you've just been packing it in there. Maybe you even inherited this house from your parents and it was already kind of full of weird stuff that you didn't totally know about. And then you've just been kind of packing it in and ignoring it in there. And if you open the door, some things start to fall out. There's like cobwebs in there. There's who knows what in there. But what liver flushing does is it's like you take a big trash can and you go in there and you start pulling some things out. But as you start pulling some things out, maybe things from the top shelf start falling down on you, crushing other things. A bag dumps, hits the sharp edge of a box and empties its contents. And you start noticing the creatures scurrying from the noise. So it's kind of like that when you start digging into the liver. And as you can imagine, this area, this packed storage area that's been neatly packed away starts to unravel in some ways. And you're also, you're bringing light into somewhere that was dark and was put away. And so you're opening up boxes, you're looking at them as opposed to just leaving them to rot in their peaceful place. So that's a really good way to think about what it means when we dig in and we are trying to unearth and uproot the pathology. We are actually shining the light of awareness onto these things that have been in the shadows. So it is a gnarly process, and like I said, it is not linear. So the other way where you're putting things slowly building up into latency, that's actually more linear. You may gently progress with symptoms until eventually organs fail and you die, but it's like it's almost predictable, as you go through one system starts to become congested, it affects the next system, and so on. It progresses sort of gently and slowly. A lot of which some of those symptoms we actually think of as aging, they're really more like this buildup of congestion and toxicity and breakdown of the organs and the body over time. So that's something that we're comfortable with. We're more comfortable with this gentle progression. Digging into the closet and starting to pull things out is not a comfortable or linear approach. And oftentimes things can get worse before they get better. So this is why I really want to make it clear that true healing in this way is optional and it's not for everyone because it often does get worse before it gets better as we unpack these layers. And there's also this phenomenon of retracing, which is really important in the healing world. And this also goes back to Herring's law of cure, which is that it, turns back in the reverse order. And it's not always a strict rule that, can always be applied, but oftentimes as the layers are peeled, some symptoms that had gone into remission or were suppressed by newer symptoms or a different kind of pathology start to reemerge. And so we might think, oh, I was totally done with those skin rashes, I cured them, they're in remission. And then as we dig into the material and sort of turn back the time on this burden of toxicity, we may hit a vein of an older symptom or an older pattern that we then sort of have to live through another time and process that junk as it's moving out. And generally it looks less, less time consuming and slightly less painful than the first time around. But depending on the level of how much we were suppressing during that time, for example, if we were taking drugs to not feel certain emotions, or we were taking a lot of antihistamines to not have flares in our skin, then we may have to go through something even more intense or extreme than we experienced the first time. And this is hard and this is rough. And you don't always know, you pretty much never know when you're truly going to get through that round. It does, you do get through, but it can be pretty extended periods of time where you are retracing a particular pattern, even up to 6 months, sometimes even longer. Sometimes it's short, and sometimes it's just like that brief interlude that's clear, crystal clear, and this thing comes up and then it like clears and passes, it heals, and you feel that, and it's like you're clear of it. Now, sometimes this retracing with a symptom happens not just once. Also, we might go through a round of retracing. We broke through it. Awesome, we're free again. And then it might come up again when we get into another pocket of that similar toxicity. And with the liver flushing, we can't control what parts of the liver are cleared out at what times. So we are at the mercy of the body's ability to move what it can move and where it chooses to move and what loosens up, like what in that storage unit, like what can you access at one time? And if the top starts to fall down on you, then that's going to come out, even if it's older, then being able to get into the next area of the main section. So there's a lot of different ways that this can go. And it's just really important to keep in mind that it won't be linear. Likely there will be cycles that you will be repeating and returning to the tracks that you've witnessed in your life, that you've been through. This can be emotional, it can be memories, it can be symptoms, physical symptoms. And again, we're sort of peeling the layers and getting deeper into the system, peeling back time and hopefully reversing that, trajectory of dis-ease that we have built up in our life. Another important thing to be aware of with this true healing process is that it will undoubtedly transform your life in some way, and sometimes it's not exactly what we expect, or we might even wish that we could go back to being less sensitive or being, our body being less responsive to our environment. But in general, if you clean the body and refresh and restore its true vital functions, your life and lifestyle and the sort of asks from your body will will inevitably change to some degree. And this is what I love. I love aspects of this because this is why I try to let people know that they don't need to worry so much about their diet at the beginning, because as the body gets cleaner, as we clean the liver out, the body itself will direct us towards, will help us hone in on a more optimal diet for us individually. And this process takes time, but it's inevitable that the cravings start to shift, that the impact of certain foods becomes more obvious, and that like literally the body tells us more clearly. The communication is more clear, and there's like less interference from, toxicity and pathogens. So we're able to receive these communications in a clearer way and therefore be guided towards what nourishes and feeds us in a more true way. Some people You might find that you're frustrated that you can't or don't want to lean on the substances or foods or drugs or habits that helped us get through while we were in this like lower, a more suppressed vitality, more diseased state. Obviously, it works best to embrace these changes and be grateful for a higher functioning and more sensitive vessel, but it can come as a shock when someone is used to being able to abuse their body in a certain way, and then the body is communicating clearly, no, this isn't working for me anymore, and I want something more like this. So that's another aspect to be aware of that may happen to you and not you can't necessarily unknow what you learn or unfeel what you feel. It is of course possible to sort of deaden down the system again and shut things down and move back into suppression, but in general, as you start to awaken and clear up and move, bring flow back into these detoxification systems, and the body gets excited about healing and it starts to ramp up that process and help to push you further in that direction. So it can be, you know, it can be a thing to sort of shut that all down again and close it up. Better to embrace the fact that you're moving forward and the body is helping push you in that direction. Sometimes we might have a certain desire for our life or an aspiration or a prayer, and we think we want something, a purification, a clarity, or restoration, and then the process that gets us there might be so much more than you bargained for, so painful, or such a wringing out, or, such a resurgence of certain emotional states or trauma to process that we had no idea what we were really asking for. So again, good to be humble in the process and try not to bite off more than we can chew. One other aspect that I wanted to make sure to cover about the true path of healing is that sometimes it can get hard to distinguish between what is a detox reaction and what is actually not good for you. And I think that some of the healing community can take this way too far in saying that any symptom at any time is a healing reaction, it's a detox reaction, and therefore we should just push harder into it or deeper. I know I myself have gotten caught up in that loop at times. So it's a very delicate dance of learning yourself and also learning to track, and self-reflect on how much do you push into something, how intense are you with taking something on, and how much can you be receiving proper feedback. And so not all symptoms and reactions are from detoxification or Herxheimer or healing reactions. Some of them happen because we are actually doing something that isn't great for us and that we can turn that ship around. Some of these, you know, we might see examples of this with fasting, where it's like you're getting weaker and weaker, but you think that you're making, you tell yourself you're making progress and that it's just a necessary evil to cleaning things up. But if that depletion is continuing, if you're not bouncing back from that, you want to really reevaluate what your body is needing at this time and what supports you need. Really, detoxification requires a high amount of nutrients and a high amount of minerals. So the further I've gotten along the path, the more I actually recognize the need for adequate flooding of nutrients, adequate flooding of electrolytes and minerals. So it's really important to keep in mind. And of course, diets can be very confusing. And that's why it's often helpful to not go too extreme, to track symptoms, but not track them so closely that you're, you know, jumping to conclusions every 5 minutes, right? That can be a really tricky slip and slide to climb out of, right? And in general, when you're applying detox regimen, especially if you're getting deeper and deeper into flushing, into parasite, pathology stuff, different, pathogens that killing stuff. As you get deeper into that and the more it's important also to take breaks so that you can see what what is what is your baseline of symptoms, right? And what's being stirred up by the protocols that you're applying. This is, a really important area that I'm sure a lot of us need to practice more restraint on and trying to make sure we know what a baseline is for ourselves. So, there's some aspects that can get confusing with this path of uprooting the true cause of disease. And of course, what is appealing and exciting to me about this path of true healing is that there is the possibility for rejuvenation and sort of turning back the clocks for our bodies and our experience that is really exciting to me. And I really do believe that human body, vessel, the whole system is capable of amazing things and that we aren't really working in that full spectrum of what's possible. And so the more people that we can have cleaning out their livers entirely and see how that kind of body evolves over time, right? To see what we're capable of. And then what's really exciting would be the next generations from giving birth from someone who has these organs in a really high functioning state and then from the childhood, has a really good start on life and as clean of an environment and diet as possible and see what we're capable of. So that's really inspiring to me and hopefully for you too. But I wanted to make this video to make sure that you know what you're getting into, even though, of course, you'll be like, I did not know this was going to happen, but this is a warning. This is a warning. Going for true healing is optional. The other option is what most people choose to do, which is allow things to just slowly build up over time. You're going to have a more predictable process. You're just going to generally lose energy over time. But the option of digging into it and going for true healing is likely going to be messy, complicated, difficult, hard, painful, confusing, all of these things for an extended period of time. So, really want you to consider that. And yeah, let me know if you have any other questions on this topic or if this was helpful for you. Wishing you a beautiful day. May all beings